let's talk about inflation. Steve Cotton is the president of Cotton Wealth Management Associates, LLC, in Dallas, Texas. Steve, welcome to Stacey on the Right. How are you?
I am just great, Mary, tonight. I'm so glad to be with your very well-informed listeners.
Oh, well, thank you so much, and happy Friday to you. So let's talk about the Financial Times says that because of what's happening in the Middle East, the crisis in the Middle East, which, of course, we all think fuel, we all think oil, right? That it's going to surge U.S. inflation, and we're going to be the highest in the G7. Why is that? I mean, inflation's been under control compared to where it was under the Biden years, right? It's gone down. It's been under control. So why would it's only been 4 weeks? Why would this surge inflation?
Well, I've seen other studies that say that before what's happening in the Middle East and with global oil prices really negatively impacts the U.S. economy, we'd have to have $150 a barrel oil for about 3 months. I do not see that happening. I think the Financial Times reported sort of a worst-case assessment, but the problem is not one of supply. The problem is, number one, the insurance companies like Lloyd's of London refuse to write insurance policies for tankers transiting the Strait of Hormuz. And so a lot of those tankers are sitting idle in the Gulf at the moment, waiting for approval to proceed. At the same time, you've got American forces shutting down Iranian drones and missiles, and they've eliminated their Navy. And the remaining concern, I think, frankly, from a technical standpoint, is what about mines on the seafloor and things like that. Mm-hmm. But I do not expect this temporary spike in oil prices to be a long-term thing. And so you're exactly right. We had 9% inflation in the Biden years. This is kind of a glass full, glass half empty discussion, because if you remember the Biden years, we had 9% inflation. It's been down a little bit under 4. It's popped back up over 4. But I do not think we're going to see a long-term negative impact of this, because I think as soon as that strait opens up, the tankers move and oil prices plummet.
Now, how do we get the strait to open up? I think he said that they gave him a gift and allowed 7 tankers through, 7 ships through, I believe, but the rest of them aren't going to be allowed to be let through. How much longer can they hold on? They don't sound like they're all that organized, and they've got children fighting now. There's reports of them drafting like 12-year-old kids. How can they really hold the strait?
Well, we've eliminated their Navy. We've eliminated most of their drone capacity and their missile capacity. They're not going to have any fast boats running out there. A lot of the Iranian talk is bluster, and it is typical propaganda. I think the government itself the IRGC is fragmented and disorganized. I'm not sure who Trump is negotiating with, but they're, if you stop all the traffic in the strait, that includes Iranian exports. And I think that China is the biggest loser if that happens. And I think China is pressuring Iran to allow these shipments to proceed. But, it's Iran versus the whole world, and I don't believe they're going to be able to continue this much longer. Matter of fact, President Trump has even offered American insurance guarantees for these tankers. Yeah, and so I think there's all kinds of things in play here. I do not expect the Iranians are not going to be allowed to threaten all of their neighbors and the global oil traffic. They're just not going to be allowed to do that, and I think the days are numbered for this regime.
They have to be. I mean, they have to be. I'm waiting for Baghdad Bob to pop back up and tell us that everything's fine. Remember him? Remember Baghdad Bob?
Yeah. Yes. Well, the one consistent theme in dealing with Iran is they always lie. They've always lied. They always misrepresent. It's a weapon for them. And I just think that they have managed to single-handedly alienate all of their neighbors, Saudi Arabia, China, and India, who are recipients of this oil. They've alienated everybody. They don't have any friends at all. They don't even have friends in the liberal centers in Europe other than the Muslim centers.
What about China, though? Why is that's the question I have. Why is China not coming to their aid? I'm shocked.
Well, I think part of this dynamic, if you think globally, the Chinese have been trying to corner the global market on rare earths and precious minerals and strategic minerals for 30 years, and they've largely gotten control of most of that. If we have victory in the Middle East, we now potentially control their oil, because 80% of their oil comes from the Middle East. About 20% of it used to come from Venezuela. We now control Venezuelan oil. So I think the big trade-off here is, I think President Trump is basically telling China, we'll guarantee your access to oil, but you got to guarantee our access to critical and strategic minerals. I think that's a theme that hasn't really been talked about very much, but I think is very much at play here.
You know, we were told that with the tariffs, the tariffs were going to increase inflation, and the cost of everything you buy from Temu is going to now be, the $5 T-shirt's not going to be $15. What happened to that? That didn't happen. Like, I didn't see. Now, I don't order a lot of stuff. I'm at that phase of my life where I'm giving my stuff to everyone else and hoping they take it. Right. So I tell my husband, you bring one more, travel mug into this house, and you're going to have to take 2 out every time you bring one in. So I'm not bringing it, but are the prices, those prices really didn't go up the way we heard they were going to go up, did they?
You're exactly correct. In fact, the tariff threats and fears did not materialize. I'll tell you what had happened exactly. In some of these cases, the exporter paid the higher tariff. In some of these cases, the importer paid the higher tariff. In very few cases did the end customer pay the higher tariff, because a lot of these exporters and importers did not feel they could comfortably pass that on to the end customer. Let me give you an example. And the customer had something to say about this, too. If I go to the liquor store and I really like Scotch whiskey, and I now see Scotch whiskey is $98 a bottle, maybe I divert and I buy Kentucky whiskey instead. So there's been a lot of that substitution going on, but the doom and gloom that the anti-tariff people predicted never did come to pass, and we had an up market after that April period, March period, until this conflict where the price of oil came into question and transiting through the Strait of Hormuz came into question. But, now, having said that, there are tariffs that are going to be inflationary. Let me give you an example. Trump put a 50% tariff on the price of copper. We import about 50% of the copper that we need. We cannot surge our domestic copper miners' supplies fast enough to make up for that other 50%. So that's going to be an inflationary thing that we're going to feel in the price of copper wire, new houses, etc. But that's really more an exception than the rule. And the tariff has been a mixed story, but it has not been the horror story that some of the fearmongers predicted.
And I saw in Canada they were taking all the American whiskey off the shelves, all the Jack Daniels and all that stuff. You can only buy Canadian whiskey. Are they still doing that, or have they stopped that nonsense because people are like, okay, this was good for a while, but I really want my Jack?
Well, that's a good question. I haven't done any market surveys in Canada. I think the Canadians have been a little bit alienated by the brashness of the Trump White House, and we've hurt some feelings. And I don't think that's helpful. I think, although I support many of the president's economic initiatives, I would like a little less bluster and a little more finesse.
Yeah, well, that's Trump. He's from Queens. You're not going to get a lot of finesse out of Queens.
That's true. You can't take the New Yorker out of the New Yorker,
It's so funny because I grew up in New Jersey my whole life. And, New York was always there. Donald Trump, when I was a kid, was always a part of my world, right? He always was. His language doesn't bother me at all. Like, none of that bothers me. I get it. So I really don't. When people complain about he's so harsh, I'm like, No, he's just saying, he's just speaking his mind. Everybody says they want someone to speak their mind. They want the truth. I want the truth. I want them to be honest with me. And then when he's honest and speaks his mind, you don't like it.
Well, I think that's true, but I think, there's an element of him that's a little bit bully. But when you're dealing with North Koreans, you're dealing with Chinese, you're dealing with lying Iranians, you're dealing with the criminals of the world, I don't mind a little bullying and a little bluster. And I think Trump is always playing three-dimensional chess at any given time.
Yes.
People who underestimate him don't get it. They really don't. But he is a very sophisticated tactician. He wrote The Art of the Deal. You're still seeing with this Middle East situation, you're seeing the art of the deal played out. And it's very sophisticated.
Yeah, I've always said that, I think during Trump 45, I would question what he was doing. Like, why is he doing this? This doesn't make any sense. I think this is a mistake. And then you go, ba-boom, ba-boom, like, oh, look at that. For instance, let's go back to the oil. You've got Venezuela oil is now coming to Texas to be refined, right? So that's coming to Texas. It's not going to Cuba. Cuba's not getting that oil. Trump never wanted China to have a foothold in Cuba, and he saw that coming. So what do? He basically crashed. Well, Cuba's economy wasn't much to have anyway. It really wasn't much there anyway. China was propping it up as much as they could, and with the Venezuela oil was really everything that was propping up Cuba. That's gone now. He just went in, he took Maduro out of bed, and that was the end of it. So now they don't have oil. China's not getting oil. He's stopping all of the ghost ships coming out from Venezuela. Anything that comes here to the United States. And so it's been one thing after the next. It's just strategically happened. I think Iran, I think he was planning on, but not this soon. But when they told Steve Witkoff that, we're weeks away from a nuclear weapon and you can't stop us right now, I think that kind of changed the course and the way in which things were going to be done.
I think that's exactly right, Mary. You're spot on with that. And the other thing that people forget is that the Chinese had effectively taken control of both ends of the Panama Canal through front companies. Trump saw that. He put pressure on the Panamanian government. They have now ejected the Chinese. The Chinese no longer control that choke point for global commerce. Even our military ships transition from the Atlantic to the Pacific and back through the Panama Canal. Trump has systematically knocked the underpinnings out of the strategy that the Chinese have been putting in place through several American presidents. President Trump is the first president to take bold strategic actions to reposition the country, to dominate the hemisphere, to control the strategic threats against us, and to neutralize them. And I applaud that.
Oh, absolutely. So ultimately, to put a bow on this, you disagree with that piece that says that, we're going to, in Financial Times, that we're going to see inflation skyrocket, that's not going to happen here, especially if this doesn't go on for long. I think it's got to be over by like June in order to not have it affect the midterms. But Marco Rubio was making it sound today that it's only going to be 2 to 4 more weeks. If they can pull that off, I don't think we see much of an effect on the economy. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think it's premature to predict a worst-case inflation scenario like the Financial Times did. I think they're way over their skis. There are two parts of this. There's the military part, where Iran is rendered incapable of attacking anybody substantively. But the more important and the more difficult and the more challenging piece is the next follow-on government. I think one of the reasons Trump has not attacked the Iranian oil fields is because he wants to preserve that infrastructure for the next, hopefully, pro-Western Iranian government. There are elements in Iran that want to work with the West. They want to be in peace with their neighbors, and they want economic development. Iranians have always been pro-American. It was not until 1979 and these religious, fanatic Nazi Islamists took power and killed the moderates and killed the conservatives, or the more politically liberal elements, the more pro-democratic elements, It was not until 79 that these thugs took over and Iranian society went negative against the West. But until then, they were one of our strongest allies in the Middle East, and I think they can be again. But the biggest challenge is how do you neutralize the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps elements that are still roving in the country, and how do you empower the pro-democratic citizens to defend themselves and take on these IRGC units and neutralize them? That's the trick, and I think the Israelis are probably deeply involved in that element of the strategy. I don't think we are as much as the Israelis are, and they're pretty good at internal games playing.
Much better than we are. We're the ones who got rid of the Shah, so we really should probably just sit down when it comes to any kind of regime change in Iran.
Well, we didn't get rid of the Shah. The Shah had cancer, and his regime was in serious political trouble, and we allowed him to come to America for cancer treatments, and they took over while he was gone. But the Shah was our friend and our ally until Iran wasn't. But if Trump's strategy and the Israeli strategy is successful, we could see the longest prolonged period of peace and economic development in the Middle East ever in world history. I think that's what Trump is trying to do, and he's bold enough he might just pull it off. But
as we're sitting here, he has. As we're sitting here, I just saw an update come across on Fox that President Trump is now urging Saudi Arabia to join the Abraham Accords and arguing the war with Iran is reshaping the Middle East and creating new opportunities. So he's trying to get them to sign on. So I think it's all coming together. Trump's the guy. Without Trump, none of this would be happening.
You're exactly right, Mary. You're exactly right. And if you'll remember, the Saudis we think they were about to sign and join the Abraham Accords when Hamas launched the October 7th attack on Israel, which was intended to stop that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, you have points in history of times in history. You saw Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher, John Paul II, and Gorbachev were the right people in place at the right time to bring down the Berlin Wall, to open up Russia, right, to open up the Soviet Union, to break it up. And now we've got Trump, we've got Netanyahu, we've got the Saudi prince who is progressive. He's young, he's more progressive, more liberal. You've got some of the right players in place. I think that if you're going to get peace in the Middle East, this is the time. And if it doesn't happen now, it's going to be a long time before it does.
Well, I think that's right. I remember, though, back in the days of Yasser Arafat and the PLO, the Israelis tried many, many, many times to cut a peace deal with Yasser Arafat, and they got to the point where they said, Yasser Arafat never misses an opportunity to miss an opportunity. They just never could take yes for an answer. And I'm hoping that the Arabs, because of Trump's early initiatives earlier this year, going to all those Saudi and Arabian capitals and saying, we can either have war or we can have economic development. Will you join with me to have economic development and make things better for your people? They all uniformly said yes. They want to buy into that vision. The Iranians have been the sole troublemakers in that region and all of their proxies. And with them neutered, we now finally have a chance for peace. And you're exactly right. That would not have been possible without Donald Trump.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been a really I hope I get to speak with you again. This has been a wonderfully interesting conversation. Thank you so much. Steve Cotton, president of Cotton Wealth Management Associates, LLC in Dallas, Texas. Any socials that you want to promote that people should know about?
Well, you can go to my website, cottonwma.com, and learn a lot about financial planning and wealth management, and I've got some radio and TV clips on that. But I stay very close to these issues, and it's just always a joy to be on the program with you and with Stacey, and this is one of the best programs in the country. So keep up the good work.
We thank you so much for that, and have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Thank you so much, Steve Cotton.